Hi, you are about to engage in the guidebook unit, the Odyssey. The purpose of this video is to learn about the geography of the journey the main character takes. You'll also learn that the story has a predictable structure in how conflicts are presented and then resolved. Be sure you have your handout and something to write with for the video. What would you be willing to endure to return home to your family or a loved one? Would you sail a ship into brutal storms? Single-handedly fight off hordes of men, battle a cyclops, venture into the underworld? Odysseus, the main character in the Odyssey, is willing to endure all this and more. Odysseus was the king of Ithaca and spent many years away from his family and kingdom fighting in the Trojan War. Once the war ended, he wanted nothing more than to return home. The book The Odyssey tells of the journey Odysseus took and the hardships he endured as he tried to make his way back to his family. The Odyssey was written by an ancient Greek author named Homer. The Odyssey is actually a type of poem called an epic. Epic poems are long narrative poems that contain stories of heroic acts. Scholars believe the Odyssey was written at the end of the 8th century, somewhere in the coastal region of ancient Greece. In this epic, you will follow the journey of the hero, Odysseus, as he travels the Aegean Sea. Odysseus spent 10 years fighting in the Trojan War in a place called Troy. The story begins at the end of the war, as Odysseus and his men begin to make their way home. While you read the Odyssey, you can map Odysseus's possible journey using present-day geography. We say possible journey because this story was written over 1,000 years ago, and the names of many of the locations have changed. However, understanding the route we believe Odysseus took will help you track events in the story. Odysseus's goal is to return home to his family and kingdom in Ithaca. Looking at the map, this should be a relatively short trip, yet it will take Odysseus 10 long years to complete his journey. After leaving Troy, he and his men make their first stop on the border of modern-day Greece and Istanbul. Let's look at the map to see some of the other stops Odysseus made on his journey home. As each star appears, remember that you'll be reading about the exciting and sometimes life-threatening events that happened to Odysseus in each of these places. Looking at this map, it's easy to see why it took over 10 years for Odysseus to finally get home. So now you are ready to answer question number 1 on your handout. Pause the video and follow the directions on the slide. Let's check your work. Where was Odysseus trying to go? We have learned that Odysseus was trying to return to his family in Ithaca. Why did it take him so long to get there? His journey home took so long because he kept stopping at different places. Now, let's take a look at how the geography of this story keeps the story moving. You've seen the long and winding route Odysseus took to get home. So let's learn more about why that geography is so important to this story. You might be wondering, why would someone so desperate to get home spend 10 years at sea and make so many stops? To answer that question, we need to look at what happens each time Odysseus makes a stop. Many of the chapters of the Odyssey follow the pattern in this graphic organizer. Odysseus sets out for Ithaca and then has to stop because he runs into some kind of trouble or conflict. He must then either solve the problem himself or rely on the gods to intervene and solve the problem for him. Eventually, Odysseus's problem is resolved and he sets out again only to make another stop and be presented with another problem. He will then once again either need to resolve the conflict on his own or the gods will intervene to resolve the conflict. This pattern will repeat itself many times throughout the story. The geography of this story is important because it helps maintain the conflict. As long as Odysseus continued to travel, the author was able to keep presenting problems that Odysseus had to solve before he could return home. You've just learned that the story, the Odyssey, follows a predictable structure that repeats itself a number of times. Odysseus will set out for Ithaca. Then he will encounter a problem or conflict. These conflicts usually get resolved in one of two ways. Answer question number 3 on your handout. What are the 2 ways Odysseus resolves conflicts in the story? Pause the video and follow the directions on the slide. Let's review your answer. Every time Odysseus makes a stop, he encounters a conflict. Then one of 2 things will likely happen. Odysseus will either solve the problem himself, or the gods will intervene to help him solve the problem. Remember, this structure is going to repeat itself over and over again throughout the story. Knowing about the geography of Odysseus' possible journey and the patterns of how problems are presented and then solved is important to understanding the sequence of events in the text you are about to read. Use this knowledge when you engage in the guidebook unit, the Odyssey. When you finish this video, be sure to turn in your completed handout to your teacher.